Portland is too expensive.
Portland is a great value.
Which is it? Well, it depends on what you're comparing it to. We moved to Portland 6 years ago and we absolutely love it here. And we want to help you make the same move. My name's Aaron Cullen. This is Brianna Cullen. Together, we have a real estate company right here in Portland, Oregon. I'm a local real estate agent, so if you guys have any questions or thinking about moving out here, go ahead and connect. My information's right down there in the description area. Okay, now today, in this video, we're talking about the cost of living in Portland. Is it too expensive or is it really affordable? We're gonna get into all those things, and it's actually very nuanced and it depends on your perspective. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. And we're going to share some data and some resources just to kind of level set. When you talk about cost of living, you're really comparing it to a national index that's set at 100. So 100 is the average, and anything over that is more expensive than the national average, and anything less than that is less expensive.
So it's not just housing that makes up the cost of living somewhere. Although that is a big portion of it, is the cost of housing. But then you've got your utilities, you've got your taxes, you've got your food, you've got childcare,
transportation. And so you'll see in some of the resources that we share that we're really looking at each of those items. And just to spoiler, Portland is more expensive than the national average. When you're looking at the index, Portland is a 119, so about 19 points more expensive than the national average.
Yeah, and don't take our word for it. Let's pull up a little resource here. It says, Portland is still much cheaper than other big West Coast cities. Housing is why. And if we scroll down here, cost of living index relative to the West Coast cities. So here we're comparing it to San Diego, San Jose, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles. You can see Portland's a 119. Remember, 100 is the national average.
Here we are comparing Portland's cost of living to the West Coast cities. I think this is not a surprise. A lot of the people that we help move to Portland regularly are coming from the Bay Area, Los Angeles. But of course, we're also working with people in Florida and Texas and the East Coast. But when it comes to West Coast cities, Portland is still by far the least expensive, the most affordable city on the West Coast. And like this article mentions, housing is the reason why. So when you look at only housing, Portland's index is actually a 143, which is, significantly more expensive than that 100 average. But compared to San Jose, whose housing index is 309, more than twice as much, Portland looks like a real bargain. So when you look at, and here Aaron's pulling up by each of these categories, food, housing, utilities, transportation, where each of these cities fall out, Portland's housing is just far and away the most affordable.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients are moving here from the Bay Area or from Southern California. So you can really see that here, San Diego 214, San Francisco 283. So it is definitely way more value for housing here than versus those places.
I think it's also important to compare Portland to some other kind of similarly sized, similarly oriented cities across the country. So to share some other data, here we have how Portland lines up against Seattle, Austin, Salt Lake, Nashville, and Indianapolis. And you can see here, other than Seattle, which we'll kind of, take out of this comparison for the sake of this conversation, Portland is the most expensive from a housing perspective. Although Austin is, pretty close and Nashville isn't too far behind, but those cities are less expensive on each of the other factors. So when you're looking at taxes, Austin is quite a bit less expensive. When you're looking at childcare, these other cities are quite a bit less expensive.
Yeah, and just to highlight taxes are very expensive here as far as like the rate for your income taxes in the state of Oregon is pretty high here compared to a lot of other states. We rank in like the top 5 for most expensive for state income tax. So that is definitely something to be aware of. I feel like, it's not quite even, but there are some things where it does make up a little ground for it. We don't have any sales tax here locally. So I know a lot of places it's, like 10% is their sales tax. So, if the more food you're buying, the more things that you're buying gadgets and shopping, that's that you are going to save more there, especially if you have a bigger family and you spend more money. So that definitely does save you something there.
And also, one thing to point out that we didn't say earlier is that this data is coming from 2022. And so, as with anything, there's a lag in pulling this type of data. One thing to point out is that in Multnomah County, preschool is now free, right? Which is coming from those state income taxes, but is offsetting childcare costs in Multnomah County. And these statistics assume 2 adults, 2 children, 1 child age 4 and 1 child age 9. And I think as we're looking at all of this data in general, it's really important to think about how this is calculated, and it's all coming from averages. So you have to make sure when you're thinking about your personal situation that you're comparing apples to apples, because in one city you may be choosing private school, whereas in another city you're able to use great public schools. And so you have to really remember that these are all averages, and what is your lifestyle choice? What is your family's situation when it comes to things like childcare or education?
Yeah, because childcare, you could, for a preschool, from say, 2 years old to 5 years old, you may choose to send them to a French immersion preschool where it's more expensive than sending them to one that's not.
Or you may have one parent who's a stay-at-home parent, and this childcare cost isn't really a factor for your family. And then just, I was curious about Boulder, because I feel like Boulder is kind of a city that's similar to Portland in terms of the outdoor lifestyle and just a lot of other factors. Boulder is at 143 on the national index, so quite a bit more expensive than Portland. I know housing there is very expensive. And then even Bend in Oregon has become such a popular location, and Bend is at 127, so almost 10 points more expensive than Portland as well. And then I think when we talk about cost of living, it's also really important to think about quality of living. And Portland does rank high on a lot of quality of life lists, and the reasons are the access to nature and the outdoors and the healthy lifestyle that brings with it. I think that's where Boulder and Bend and some of those other cities come into play. A really strong sense of community here in Portland, and then a really vibrant culture, including beloved and celebrated restaurants, food and beverage scene. These things really add up to the quality of life, as well as strong urban planning and transportation, including a really strong bike-friendly culture. The main drawback that is mentioned associated with Portland on these kinds of lists is the cost of living.
Yeah, and Portland has the highest, and I've said this in other videos, the highest bike commuters. We're hovering like around 5%, 5.5% of commuters that commute by bike. It used to be up around 7%, but it's been coming down over the years since COVID. But that's just really neat. So you will see like a lot of bikers here, a lot of bike shops. You're gonna see a lot of kayaks and stand-up paddleboard shops. It's all very popular because we have 2 huge rivers here, plus smaller rivers off of the Willamette, off of the Columbia. And then of course we have, the Pacific Ocean that's just, like less than 70 miles west from here. And then we've got the mountains, again, less than 70 miles to the east of us.
That's the big question, like what do all these factors mean? And it really depends on, for your lifestyle, what you value most. For some people, that natural beauty, the proximity to the mountains and the ocean and the community, the culture, the lifestyle makes the higher costs feel worth it and feel like the value is really still there and Portland's worth the investment. I think Portland also, as you mentioned earlier, tends to feel like a great value for professionals who are relocating here from maybe a more expensive metro and they're able to sustain their income level. And, you know, it's a bit of geo arbitrage, they call it, where your income level maybe matches that higher cost of living geography, but you're able to take that and build a life here that when it comes to housing and some of these other costs is more affordable.
And if you're coming from somewhere, say the housing is less expensive than here in Portland, you know, there's other ways to try to hack that a little bit. You know, you could buy something that has an ADU, or if you have some extra cash, you could build out an ADU on your property. The city of Portland is really providing a lot of incentives for people to build ADUs because they want more housing, more affordable housing options for people and more places to rent. So if, you know, that's a great way to hack, is you could, you know, build an ADU or buy something with an ADU. A lot of places in the city of Portland will have big basements where you can build out a garage and convert those. So there's other options, you know, if you're looking for a way to kind of get your housing costs down.
What is the median housing cost here right now?
The median housing cost here is about $550,000 to $600,000. And it really also depends on what neighborhood and, you know, what suburb, what part of the city you're talking about. So it's really very nuanced, but that's the median here in the Portland metro is like $550,000 to $600,000 is what you can expect. But then if you go places like Lake Oswego, you're looking at the median being like 1.2 million. Or, you know, if you go to Beaverton, it's around $600,000.
And I think that nuance is the key point, because all of these are based on medians, but you have to consider if you are interested in the median house where you currently live, because if you're looking for something maybe bigger than the average home, more luxurious, or in a more desirable part of town, then you can't compare the median price here. You can't assume that the median price here is going to work for you. It's, again, going to be elevated based on those preferences. And so I think that can often trip people up. I think for us, just to give a little background on our story, we were living in the Los Angeles area, and we did start looking at buying a place in Los Angeles. And then at the time, we also started looking at Portland, and we started looking at Indianapolis. So it's interesting to me that Indy is on this list because we have family there, and we also had some rental properties and investments in Indy. And that was an interesting experience because we expected Indianapolis to be so significantly less expensive than Los Angeles, but because of the areas that we were interested in there and the type of home that we wanted, you know, it wasn't anywhere near the median home price in Indy. And actually,
comparing it to Portland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the homes that we actually toured in Indy was the same price as the home that we bought here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you just have to think about, again, make sure you're comparing the apples to apples when you're comparing the cost between different locations.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit further nuanced cost of living. So let's look at Portland, what the cost of living, just to break down for you. The housing, the average is right at about $18,000 a year that you're looking for your housing costs. Transportation you're gonna spend is around $13,000. Your taxes for federal and state is almost $18,000. And your child care is $16,000. And your food is gonna be $11,000. Your medical expenses are gonna be $7,400. And so all this equals $94,000. You can see right here for a family of 4 to sustain a livable wage.
And one thing to point out is that housing here is both renting and buying. And so that's going to be different for someone who's actually looking to move here and buy a home. Also, I would say that the conclusion of this study by the Portland Chamber was that elected officials and economic developers really need to focus their efforts on bringing high-paying jobs to the Portland area, and then also working to manage and reduce the income tax burden on lower and middle income families. Yep. And I think, both of those things make great sense because that living wage is higher. The jobs need to support that.
Okay, so I want to tie this cost of living video into, why did we move here and how did that cost of living affect our choices? Now, I know you talked just a little bit about kind of our initial, when we were moving from Southern California, other cities we were kind of looking at. And in doing that, we kind of discovered, we thought Portland was too expensive for the lifestyle we wanted, but then we realized it wasn't actually too expensive for the lifestyle that we wanted, to be able to afford the kind of house and live the lifestyle we wanted once we kind of drilled into those numbers a little bit. And so that's why I think it's good to see it here compared to other cities and broken down, and that there's, especially if you're moving from a higher cost of living city to Portland on the West Coast, it's definitely doable and affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned we looked at Indianapolis, and ultimately the climate there wasn't something we wanted to take on those winters. Yeah. And for me, the natural beauty on the West Coast is just really important to me. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, in the mountains with the Grand Canyon and Sedona, and just that West Coast outdoorsy natural beauty is so important to me. And I love Indy, but it is flat and there is no view of anything. So the lifestyle here really is worth it to me.
Overall, it's a pretty temperate climate here. We're here recording this in the winter right now in February, and it is cold. It's like a very cold, probably one of the coldest days it's going to be. It's in the 20s out there, high 20s, but it's not a cloud in the sky. Bright, sunny, sunshine. And that's part of the misnomer that, Portland is just socked in gray all winter. It's really not. And this winter, we've had so many sunny days.
So sunny.
It's been so amazing to have this many sunny days. It's definitely not the norm, but it's really nice. And it also just goes to show you, it's like, hey, we could be in the Midwest or in the East Coast where it's frigid, lots of snow and ice all the time. It's just kind of like the norm. So the weather here is a huge, you get that benefit of that West Coast climate here. So you do get all 4 seasons, but it's just way more temperate, way nicer place to live for climate.
And then I think this one is kind of, I think our travel costs are less living here because there's so many beautiful, great destinations and getaways that are driving distance for us versus flying there. Yeah. I don't know. So again, this is why you have to think about what you like to do, what lifestyle you're looking for, what type of home you're looking for, what your childcare situation is before you can really do a full comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you guys are looking to make a move here and you want to talk about more specific neighborhoods and houses, go ahead and reach out, give me a call, because again, these are all very nuanced. Every neighborhood like Oswego, Westland, Beaverton, in Portland, Mount Tabor, or over on the Northwest Portland, they're all going to be different priced housing. So I want to make sure I kind of match up, hey, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? And do you want to be closer to be able to walk to shops, or are high rated public schools more important? Figure out these factors, and then we can kind of drill down to what are some of the neighborhoods that would be a good fit for you.
And like you mentioned, if some sort of creative investment opportunity is something that appeals to you, where you are adding an ADU, an additional dwelling unit on your property, or something like that to offset some of the costs, as investors, we're totally excited about that kind of opportunity. So, definitely reach out with any questions about that.
Absolutely. And if you guys enjoyed this video, stay tuned for the next one coming up right now.